Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today we're answering a very important question. Are Catholics hypocrites?
Yeah, we're going to look at one of the most common charges against Christians is that we don't actually practice what we preach, and we're going to explore ways that Catholics actually do live up to the call of the gospel.
Well, I want to kind of answer the question, are Christians hypocrites? Yes, and let me tell you why.
All right, really excited about this episode. Grateful to be in the studio with you,
man,
Father
of course.
Rick, Ryan. We've got a very special guest, Ennie Hickman, here from Del Rey Collective.
Finally.
Yes.
I know, we've been talking about this for a long time.
Well, we've tried to have him on the show like 3 times, and every time it's like, oh, no, we can't, no, or something happens.
Or let's just hang out.
Right, that's it. I actually prefer that. That's what I enjoy.
We can do that here.
No, it's all work
I
here.
want to play some Bob Hat right now, but you know,
Oh, gosh, what
bummed
a
up.
fun trip that was, man. Yeah, you're also my hunting buddy, too.
Yeah, this is and that hat. That's reminiscent of our
First
our hog
hunting.
hat. Yeah, exactly,
man.
where we
Our
met.
first hunting trip. Yeah. That's right.
Hogs.
That's right.
I think I still have the belt, by the way. I won last time. I wasn't at the most recent
Yeah,
one.
and there was I.
There was somebody else that won.
Really?
Yeah.
I need to come back.
You
So
do.
today we're talking about hypocrisy. Now,
It's a cool word, hypocrisy.
and we're going to explain what it means and where it comes from, but that's one of the most common charges that people who are, I guess, against the faith or look at the faith as something no longer relevant to modern life is that so many people do not practice the calling of Christianity, but still claim to be Christians themselves.
It's something that my sister actually says. You know, she said to me, Richie, I don't go to church because church is just filled with hypocrites. And, you know, in part, she's not right. You know, she's not wrong.
Right.
She's not wrong. There's a lot of hypocrisy. And she's been burnt a number of times by people within the church.
Yeah.
And that's a painful process to rebound from and to find the true church,
See,
the
but here's
mystical church in the middle of all that.
But here's the thing, and this is a distinction and something I want to explore in this episode. Are the people who do not practice what they preach, are they actually hypocrites? I'm going to say probably not, because there's a distinction between failing time and time again, which is what so many of us do, and that's what typically gets the charge of hypocrisy leveled against us, versus somebody who actually does not believe but still benefits from it by pretending.
Very different.
Yeah.
Right?
Very different.
Very
And
different.
but they're distinctions, but the term has kind of been, you know, liquidated to the point where anytime that somebody fails at their faith, they're called a hypocrite. But that's not the case.
It almost has to do, like, I feel like it almost has to do with how we project ourselves, right? So if I am walking around like I am perfect, right, and then am found out, yeah, there's some hypocrisy there. But I think as a church, right, we're founded on this idea that I am in need. Like I'm not claiming to be perfect. I need a savior. You know, I need to come to the sacrament. So I think in that regard, there probably is a misunderstanding, you know, and a difference between somebody who's walking around saying like, I am perfect, I practice the faith, I'm a follower, I don't sin, and then being found out, yeah, that's hypocrisy. But for the most part, I mean, or at least in my family, we can't live without the sacrament. I mean, we have to go because we're aware of our own neediness, you know, in that. So,
And
And
that's
you don't
the
project,
ultimate
but you don't
need.
project that self-righteousness in that. You project humility because you need a savior.
That's
right?
the disposition.
Maybe, but
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
maybe I'm bad at it, and somebody is misunderstood me saying, "Hey, I got to go to church." As, "Oh, aren't you perfect?" You know,
See, but you said, I think, a very important word there is acting a certain way. And the very word hypocrite comes from the Greek word for actor. It comes from the Greek word that meant somebody who acted in a theatrical play, right? And that you are somebody who is acting. You are putting on a part, and you are not actually that. It is all a pretend. It's a guise. So when somebody says you're a hypocrite, the classical term, and the way that Jesus would have used it in the Gospels, was that these people, the Pharisees and the scribes, you woe to you hypocrites. You do not actually believe what it is you're teaching. You're pretending because of what you gain from it. You gain societal importance or income or power.
Yeah.
That's very different than me saying, look, the Catholic Church is the most important thing, and then going and failing time and time again to live up to its calling. Those are distinctions that I think is important for us to explain so that people can understand that Christians do fail constantly.
Yeah. And that's
why we need the church.
And that's the thing with his sister is that, you know, she's pointing to this hypocrisy, but yet Jesus points to it too as well. And so it's a very important, the central figure of our faith, this God-man, is calling out hypocrites. And it's central to our Christian faith that hypocrites are going to hurt us. They're going to harm us. They're going to give us, you know, anger and all these other things, but forgiveness and mercy and calling it as you see it is something that Jesus Christ did himself.
And if the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes are representing the tradition of the children of Israel,
The church,
you know, the faithful people, the kahal, like a faithful gathering.
Wow.
You know,
This is a good word.
Hebrew.
Seminary,
It
huh?
is, yeah, man. Seminary's coming back out. But if that's
Kahal, wouldn't that be Greek though? Actually,
kahal is Hebrew.
isn't that where Catholic comes from?
Catholicos,
Yeah.
that's Greek.
According to the whole
Yeah.
Kahal.
Yeah,
Okay.
possibly. Look at you, linguist. You tell us out there.
But you don't need to tell us.
But no, the whole sense of you know, Jesus is pointing this out, and he's reminding the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes. Jesus is reminding us of our sinfulness every time that we gather.
Right.
And that's how we begin every single Mass. We say, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the Lord be with you and with your spirit. Let us call to mind, my brothers and sisters, that we are sinners.
Right.
Let us call to mind these occasions of our sinfulness, the fact that we have fallen short. And let us ask God for his mercy so that we may be prepared to celebrate these sacred mysteries.
Isn't that the posture with which we begin?
Yeah.
I love, you know, John the 23rd was great at pointing out this, you know, this reality within the church as well. You know, kind of the first one to point, you know, these types of things out. And I love the idea of the posture of the Christian starting there. It's like if you're stuck or sick, you know, sickness is probably another good example. Like if you're sick, but don't know you're sick, you're never going to the doctor, right? Or stuck and aren't aware that you're stuck in need of rescue or need of help. That's everything, you know, to the mature Christian to understand daily. I don't have it together. I send here, 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 and here. And then on the way here,
Are you confessing right now?
yes. Well, no,
your
I mean,
stole
Mass
on.
is this great. I love that the penitential rite comes first because oftentimes, like getting ready for Mass, you know,
With
in a
kids,
big
'cause you have a number
family,
of kids, that's
I have a
true.
number.
There's a lot of yelling.
Many.
I mean,
Right.
scripture
But that is
says,
number.
scripture says
I have a
that,
number.
I have a number.
and then you know what that number is?
I forget the number.
Let's just leave it as a number.
Well, scripture says that the righteous man sins 7 times a day.
Right. Well, that's how many kids I have.
There you go.
There's that number.
The number of children.
Be quiet, 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 be quiet.
Yeah.
But yeah, Matthew 23 is really kind of very forceful as far as Jesus' preaching go against hypocrites. And there are so many, the woe to yous. It says, woe to you, hypocrites who do this and that. So go read Matthew 23 if you want to see what Jesus thought about hypocrites. And it's pretty shocking. And I'm sure if you look through that list, there will be times where you say, oh, that's me. That's me. You know, the one I like is you give dill and cumin, but you ignore the weightier things of the law.
Yeah.
Like you're going to bring these little spices and you're going to make your sacrifice, but you're forgetting the weightier things of loving your neighbor, loving your God more than anything. So
Showing hospitality to the stranger.
Isaiah 58 this last weekend, right? On you know, this shocking, you do these fasts so that I forget the wording, but it's this beautiful, you do this, you do that. But is that the fast I want? Is it not to, to bring the needy poor into your home? Is it not to, those types of things? I think when we do, do the outer things for approval, power, status. We're engaging in that. Yeah, we're engaging in that. And I don't think that, I would say that there is a distinction between practicing something that is not of a natural virtue yet. I think there's a distinction there as well to say, I know this to be the right thing. Do you understand? You know what I'm saying?
That's like St. Augustine. St. Augustine was in that position.
Go ahead and bring the body to the right thing that that's not, I wouldn't consider that hypocrisy in the acting sense, but it's okay if you know this is the law to bring the needy or to show hospitality, just because that isn't coming from a place of, this is my natural tendency or it's a virtue yet. I still think it's okay to act like a Christian.
You become what you do.
Right, and that is the case.
Behavioral therapists.
Right.
I mean, behavioral therapy is based on that.
Right.
Is that you kind of place the behavior before the transformation.
You got a lot of experience in therapy.
I do. I'm still very sensitive, Ryan.
Just act like I didn't hurt your feelings.
Yeah, I'm cool. I'm cool, man. I'm cool.
No, it's fine. I don't care, man.
Whatever.
Mr. Rogers comes to mind. I don't. There was. You could easily say, well, this person was an alien, it was just supernatural the way he did it. But you look into his biography and you understand it from the perspective of he had to force himself to behave a certain way, and then it became a practice, and then it became perhaps an actual virtue.
Yeah, before that, Mr. Rogers was a rough dude. He's getting into bar fights. He was yelling at old people, kicking dogs.
You should have seen him. You should have seen him.
That's not true.
Francis, another good example, right? Of all at once saying, I heard the call. Of course, there's a lot of grace there to make a conversion like that. But I think he heard the gospel in a way that said, wait a minute, I'm not doing that. I want to behave that way.
No one believed him when he did it at first.
Right.
They were like,
because he was a playboy.
This is the playboy. This is the guy, the rich kid who parties all the time, and all of a sudden he's super holy. Okay, hypocrite.
Yeah.
Same thing.
And then he cut his hair like that too.
Yeah.
It's like,
Dude, that was my kind of not as intense as that, but when I really started, I really started following the Lord. And people were like, yo, Richie Pagano is, wearing a cross around his neck and handing out Bibles with the Baptists.
What's going on with Dickie Pagano?
What's going on with Dickie? Nobody ever called me Dickie Pagano. And don't start now.
You can follow him on Twitter at Dickie Pagano.
But no, I mean, that type of transformation for some is immediate. But even for my case, like I may have shifted my attention and my vision, same thing with Francis, on Christ. But it's always a progression and a process of pilgrimage toward greater communion with him. So there's still things being purified in me and sanctified and being confronted in me and the things that I suffer. And I'm suffering for the sake of charity. I'm suffering for the sake of Christ because I desire to be like him and I desire to be one with him and his people.
A lot of times we deserve that charge of hypocrisy when we are going through a conversion. It seems natural that, all of a sudden you're a holy roller, but maybe that's part of the purative process of your conversion is that you will have to bear that charge because according to all your actions beforehand, you probably likely deserve it.
there's a precedence there.
Yeah.
This comes into into something tangible when I'm praying with my wife. Because being seriously, and I think simply because on stages and things, or on a show, or you do because it's it's a job. I want to project. I want to pray really well, and there's the secret in ministry. There's the manipulation with prayer. Lord, we just pray for patience you pray, and it came to a certain point in our marriage where. I don't think I was being hypocritical, but, putting these lovely lilting, these words together in a way, she would look at me and just go like, don't pull your BS with me. Wow. You can't do, and it turned my attention away from sort of like the way that I pray in ministry or in front of people to, wait a minute, if I'm praying out loud right now in the most authentic way possible with my wife, those are different words. It's a lot more silent and it's a lot more
vulnerable.
Even a lot more vulnerable, right? Because she just saw me.
That's a powerful realization.
She just saw me, right? And so there's something with, I think, community, hypocrisy, like the anti-venom, sometimes is real community, marriage, vocations where there are people that you are intimate enough with that they can look, they don't even have to say anything to my wife doesn't have to say anything to me. She just goes like, Is that really, or are you pretending right now?
I look at my life. My most vulnerable places of my prayer is not when I'm celebrating Eucharist, presiding over a liturgy in common, or even participating in a liturgy community. It's in the middle of the night when I'm in my room and I'm praying to Christ, and I'm praying to the intercession of the saints. Those are the most vulnerable, real prayers and cries from my heart than anything else. I'd love for you, Ennie, because you're touching on something that I bring up in my marriage preparation course with all of the couples that I prepare, and spousal prayer is so important. And you're just sharing very openly about the vulnerability of your prayer as husband and wife. Can you kind of share a little bit of your experience of that importance?
Yeah, I mean, we can't start our day. I mean, we know at this point, we've been married 19 years. So this is a little bit, this takes some practice, some learning that, and it was one of those, I know we're supposed to do this in the beginning, they all say it, marriage prep, the priest said it.
Give a book on spousal prayer.
Yeah, let's pray. That sounds reasonable.
Great, I'm totally going to pray this.
Yeah, exactly. We realized, probably about 10 years ago that we weren't going to be able to fight for our marriage and our family without interceding for one another in the morning. And in the beginning, it was like, all right, let's hold and do this thing.
Super awkward.
And it didn't work. It was just that didn't work. So we ended up shifting completely to the breviary and praying the prayer of the church, because oftentimes, the Psalms and the prayers that are already written sometimes that's way off. Like, oh, that's not even close to where I'm at. But as as if we pray,
the breviary is not a horoscope,
No,
you're supposed to align yourself to it.
But 9 times out of 10, it does. Right? There is this is where we're at. Yeah, and this is a cry. So. So that is the one, the morning prayer we don't miss. And, occasionally if evening prayer and night prayer works, we're in there, but that's sort of our rhythm. And of course, sacramentally, those types of things. There's nothing better than coming home from work and meeting at mass.
And that's why we wanted to have you on this particular episode, is because, I've known you, tangentially, and we've met a handful of times, and these guys pretty well, and you really do lead to your best efforts, an authentically Christian life. You really try to lead a Catholic life, from the things that and the people that you've ministered to the way that you set an example in your home or in your community. So we thought it'd be really good to have you on this topic.
Yeah, you're open to just being vulnerable with people and saying, I try. That's what we do. We try our best to do this.
Well, and it's within community, that I feel like we've had permission to be witness first and teacher second. For whatever reason, people keep inviting us on stages and shows and that's fine and good. But man, what would it be worth? If I wasn't, authentic in the home and in our neighborhood and those types of things. So, my conversion experience, it really did start there. I loved Francis. I loved the idea of, the stripping naked. Now I can only call, Father in heaven.
This is a family show.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. I loved the idea of leaving. Thomas of Solano, in his first biography, says Francis left the world. I love that idea of peace, we're gone. There is a new way. And I think I was always inspired by that all or nothing type of behavior, no matter where I was. And so when it was Christian, I sort of focused in on those things that were authentically Christian and not just nice and not just polite and not just, that mediocre status quo. And so
Ed Flanders.
Ned Flanders, the real deal, man. So, hypocrisy is one of the main reasons people say they leave churches. And one of the main reasons that young people say that they don't believe in the Christian faith anymore. I don't need to belong to a church because it's hypocrites. I just need a relationship with God. Hypocrisy, or the perception of hypocrisy, is cutting a lot of people off from the body of Christ.
It's a huge statistic.
It's a huge problem. And people, I don't want to go to church because there's a bunch of hypocrites there. They say this, but then they leave and they do this. Or, the priest says that I shouldn't be, you know, the priest tries to teach me sexual ethics, but then I see the news story about a priest in in an affair or a scandal. How can I believe you? How can I get guidance from you on matters of morality when you can't live up to them yourself? You know, that's a huge problem for modern ministry and how we can bring back people who have left over this.
Yeah.
But that's precisely where, you know, and we've said it on the show a number of times, we're held to a different standard where, you know, we're held to, and I think it's problematic to do that. I really do think it's problematic
It's
to place,
ultramontanist almost.
yeah, to place your priest or your minister or your, you know, a national speaker on a certain pedestal. That is only saved for Christ Jesus, you know?
And also how many people take themselves out of the grace of God because they're unable to forgive others or see them in light of their sickness as a brother.
I believe it is one of the most dangerous things going on in our church today.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
The celebrity priest.
Yeah, because
Sorry, Richie.
Well, I've been C-list or D-listed by you guys.
No, Mike
celebrity
Schmitz.
anybody.
You're no Mike Schmitz.
He's a good-looking guy. That guy.
I'm trying to do my beard thing, man. I'm like, you know, I'm just trying, man.
You gotta get some of that Ascension Presents makeup, dude.
I'm not doing makeup, Howard.
No makeup.
Not doing makeup.
Gosh.
But no, so anyway.
No, I think celebrity anything. You know, we and not only for the church at large, but I think for the individual, you know, you begin to believe your own hype when everyone around, and we see this, like this is the disease that happens within clericalism and, you know, sort of this money, power, scandal, this thing is that you begin to believe your own hype that you're not the same. You're literally, you are set
You become an
apart.
actor.
You become
a hypocrite.
Right. You become a hypocrite. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know where we're headed. I really don't. It's a scary thing because there's a new conference every day. There's a new YouTube channel every single day. There's, you know, we're doing all of this. And my great concern is that we're sort of, you know, jumping this chasm of Christian behavior that has to happen first and foremost in the home.
In the home, yeah.
And then secondarily with our neighbors. You know, this is a pretty important teaching. You know, Christ boils it all down.
But in the 21st century, who are our neighbors? Because the ideas of technology and the way we communicate now have radically transformed who our neighbors are. You know,
totally, 100%.
There's a great book called Networked Theology, and they have a section within that book in the digital landscape, you know, and questioning like who actually is my neighbor, and it has to come down to just basic interactivity. Yeah, and that's also why we should be very, very conscious of the fact that we are interacting online with real people.
Right.
Real people.
Yeah, and this is not a dig on conferences or YouTube channels or any of these things. I think it's all necessary, but you know, the data is in face-to-face. Loving of people is still going to be the best mode, right?
Absolutely.
And so it is a both and. I think in our witness it has to be both and, but it has to be both. And if we're not, you know, I mean, the question is, it occurred to me through the mouth of he was 5 at the time, came home from Sunday school. I was the youth minister. I was already traveling, speaking to 20,000 people a year and doing this whole thing, celebrity, you know, top of my ministry game. And my son goes,
Dad, it's Ennie Hickman. It's you. Wow.
My kids used to think that my office was the airport. That's how bad it got. And Sophia, we were driving by, there's Daddy's office. Like, oh my gosh, I got to get off the road. He's 5 years old and he comes home. We're eating breakfast. And he had already asked Kana, my wife, but we got home. He's like, Kana says, Dominic has a question for you. Dad, can we meet our neighbors? Why? Why, buddy? We're living in a cookie cutter suburban neighborhood. And he says, well, my Sunday school teacher said that Jesus commanded us to love our neighbors. So I thought we should meet them.
Wow.
So like for me, I had all, you know, and I'm going, wait, could Jesus have meant
the guy next door?
My neighbor is my neighbor? You know, like there was this huge like disconnect in my Christian living that I had never considered the fact that my neighbors were actually my neighbors. It sounds silly to say now, but the reality is, I think it is. And so, you know, part of our rule of life in our family is this idea of the 10-foot radius that, you know, based on Mother Teresa's stay where you are, you know, find your own Calcutta. This is where I am currently. You 3, 4 guys are my 10-foot radius.
Don't reference Howard.
Yeah.
Come closer. You get into my town.
Howard, stay 10 feet
Share a
back.
seat with you.
But yeah, that idea that like wherever I am and wherever God has placed me, those that are within the 10-foot radius are my neighbors. And so that, and when I'm online, you know, real people out there, and when I'm, you know, in the grocery store, real people. And so I think there is we do need to do some work in the hypocrisy area, but I think it starts with, what if we just considered those that we come into contact with more important than ourselves?
Yeah.
You know, on a daily basis. I think that maybe perhaps fewer and fewer people would think of us as hypocritical.
When we prioritize our neighbor like that, that's precisely where Jesus is, and he's calling us to virtue. He's calling us to charity. He's calling us to recognize their nakedness or their poverty and their needs, and responding accordingly to that. And that's ultimately what network theology, that book that I referenced before, that's ultimately what it's driving at, because they showed all of these different digital churches that got off the ground, but then ultimately failed, right? And it came to the conclusion that the local church is ultimately that's what Christ is establishing, because he's forming those relationships, and the only way they're going to be formed is if you have the courage to actually open up the door to your neighbor.
What are some of the barriers to this? Because I'm an outgoing person. You and I are like just peas in a pod, our personalities. I'm a very outgoing person where I reach out to my neighbors just because I'm like, hey, what's up? You know what I mean? Like, hey, like, what do you do? Or whatever.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that I think personalities are very different, and there might be a fear of others. And, you know, like another thing too is we're wired that people are in opposition to us that are out there. And so it kind of like puts this imaginary boundary for people to say, what if I go over there and I meet this guy and we're ideologically different? Yeah. Like what happens then? Right? I mean, like it
does happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. From that moment on, we started opening up our home weekly to our neighbors. And like you, I'm like, just let's talk. We can keep a conversation going. But we knew immediately, like, oh my goodness, no, they don't vote like us. They you know, the ideologies, the value systems, the way they raise their family, everything is going to be different. And again, like, you know, this incredible, you know, realization that that's also the genius of Jesus. That like in interacting with folks who don't think exactly like me, I am challenged to listen and to be patient and to love and to be. That's
the parable of the Good Samaritan. That's how he answered that question. Is that your neighbor is the person who is most different from you, who still loves you like you would love them, and then vice versa.
That's right. And
now, real quick,
real quick,
go ahead. We want to introduce you to some of our neighbors, and those are our sponsors who help us form this greater community through their sponsorship. Why don't you tell them about us?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. We are most grateful for our sponsors, and I have to first start with Hallow. Hallow is the #1 Catholic meditation and guided prayer application in the App Store today. Be sure to visit Hallow, because when you do, you'll see all sorts of prayer and meditation guided efforts that they have put together in a beautiful and most attractive way. From Taizé to Lectio Divina to Rosary and to daily gospel reflections and so much more. This is a beautiful application that you should definitely have on your phone. And if you utilize this platform, you will truly be able to advance in not only your understanding of the Catholic tradition of prayer, but be able to cultivate that in your own practice, uniquely to you. This #1 Catholic meditation and prayer app is specifically out there for you to grow in your faith. We are so grateful for their work. We are so grateful for their sponsorship. And you should take a moment and check them out, because they are truly at the very forefront of technological advancement and the new evangelization. So check out Hallow Catholic Meditations and Prayer app today. We want to tell you about our sponsor, Exodus 90. Exodus 90 is 90 days of prayer and asceticism, cold showers and devout prayer moving through the book of Exodus so that men could find greater freedom in Christ. This program is a tremendous program that over 20,000 men have already gone through, and you should consider becoming the very next member in this very powerful movement. Please consider to join Exodus 90 now. Check them out. You will not regret it. Ave Maria University, our sponsor, is an institution of higher learning in the Catholic tradition, and one that is very, very dear to me, as I am an alumnus and a graduate of 2008 from the new campus. We were part of the first graduating class, and it is awesome to see how much Ave Maria University has grown and has become not only the youngest Catholic institution, but one of the most powerful, driven in academics and faith. It is a university that appeals to all, and we'd like you to consider becoming a student at Ave Maria University, or if you know someone that is of age that may be looking at colleges and universities around the country, be sure to tell them about Ave Maria. There are over 30 majors. There's programs undergrad as well as postgrad, all the way up to PhDs in theology. You do not want to miss a chance to attend this university. It is surrounded by the oratory, this beautiful church in the middle of Ave Maria town. Just 30 miles away from Naples and the beautiful beaches. It's in Southwest Florida, so the weather is beautiful. But the greatest thing and the most beautiful thing about the university is the community. The community life is a place where young people find belonging and, most importantly, encounter Christ in the beautiful tradition of the Catholic faith. So check out Ave Maria University today. You won't regret it.
All right, thanks for that, Padre. Now, I think a lot of the national or the perception, especially among younger people, of that Christians are hypocrites comes from, I think, historically, the last 50 years of politics and the rise of the use of religion as a force or a part of the platform of political parties. You see all these people wagging their fingers saying, you can't vote for this person because they don't have this belief, or it's a typical, I would say, and I hope I'm not offending anyone, of the Southern.
You just lost a lot of people.
Just kidding. I don't care. Southern evangelical conservatives who use morality as a hammer to keep people in line in their voting block, but then they're getting, hey, I'm a Bible-believing Christian, you need to vote for me, and then they find them with a hooker and a bunch of crack cocaine. And it happens all the time,
Righteous something?
Righteous Gemstones.
Righteous Gemstones. Yeah. There's a show about that. It's absolutely
but it happens all the time.
Rated R.
And it's been so high profile that all these people growing up seeing this are like, these guys are full of it.
And I don't think it's reserved to just the political sphere, because, ever since the first bulletin was published, people can
but I'm saying political
political is probably
it.
It's weaponized it, and it's what is most publicly in your face and gut-wrenching. But even go way back to Gandhi. Like Gandhi himself said, I would quickly convert to Christianity, to Catholicism, if I were to actually meet a real and true Christian living out their faith. And I've always been taken by that perspective of his, because he saw who Jesus was, he learned his teachings, and I'm sure that he even applied it in his own understanding and ideology. But at the same time, he was still searching for that authentic witness, really.
Yeah, and more realizing. I mean, I love that quote of Gandhi too, and I oftentimes wonder what his perception was of a Christian, right?
It's probably the English imperialists who are ruling over them, first in South Africa and then in India. Oh, these are your Christians?
And there was a number of exploitation of the poor.
Yeah, they're stepping on the necks of the poor. And this is your Christian values? This is not okay.
That's right. Yeah, and so much more. I guess what I'm saying is it's one thing to read Jesus's teachings and say, that is a
good person,
teacher that I want to follow. Yeah. That's a way of life that makes sense. And I think this is the relationship. And one of the reasons why I remain Catholic and love being Catholic is because it is that beautiful cocktail of faith and reason, grace and virtue, that I actually can't behave as a Christian unless I am attached to the vine, right? Unless I will fail miserably if it is simply a teaching or a philosophy of living. I'll fail miserably at that. but the sacramental life and actual and sacramental grace in me, Jesus in me, doing the work that Jesus does is like this, like that's all I have, you know.
Who Jesus was more important than what he said. If he was still in his divinity and humanity, who he was and never said a word, he would still be more important than every teacher combined ever.
Yeah. And that's why you can be a doorman and be a saint. You know, like the idea.
St. Martin de Porres, sweeping floors. And, I mean.
Yeah, Teresa Lisieux. You can be holy where you are as long as you're attached to the vine, you know, bearing fruit in the world. And so I think it's a too simple of a storyline to say that being a Christian is simply behaving, you know, in a certain way. It also has to do with that idea of need, that I actually can't do this on my own. This is the best news of all. He's going to give me his spirit in order to do the work that he's asking me to do.
Christ is he's the divine physician, and he said the sick do not need a doctor.
And he told us that this is how it's done.
Right. Yeah, this is how it's done.
He prescribed this.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like we're creating some imaginary vine and somehow. No, he told us this is how you do it.
And thank God that he said, "Do this in memory of me." Yeah. And when you were sharing that, Ennie, I immediately had this memory of being at odds with the brother priest, like real serious, like hurt feelings. Bad conversation, turned bad. I do. I'm a sensitive Italian. What am I going to do with my life? But no, that experience happened. And sure enough, when the liturgy came rolling around where we're all together, we're renewing our priesthood next to the bishop, renewing our obedience, who does God put me right next to?
Right.
And then when I'm sharing the sign of peace, like, am I really taking this seriously? And then for me to be able to express to him, whether he received it well or not, or believed it or not, hey, man, I may have overstepped my boundary. You know, I may have said something that hurt your feelings. This is how I felt. It's just nothing but love between us, man. We're brothers. Peace. You know, peace be with you. Thank God for the circumstances. Jesus is the one who sets up the circumstances because he says, do this in memory of me.
That's right.
The circumstances of reconciliation are there, and grace is building on our nature, the nature that will ultimately be inclined toward concupiscence, sin, death, all, you know, political division and usury, you know, all these types of things.
Putting pineapple on pizza, all that stuff.
That's a good thing, though.
Ketchup on pizza. Have you ever heard of that? Yeah,
that's just terrible.
No, and in Austria, they would always hand you your slice of pizza and then a packet of ketchup.
They need Jesus,
what
man.
Man, what do they do? Concupiscence. So
excommunicable.
So, you know, here's I think a little pivot in the conversation is, okay, we understand that people are always going to fail, and by nature, and even by our theology, we have original sin. We have an inclination towards sin because we are imperfect. But what does the Catholic Church actually do? People will say the church is hypocritical and is a force for negative in the world, but the Catholic Church does more for the sick, the poor, the oppressed, the elderly, the unborn than any organization in the history of the world. The Catholic Church, by such a far stretch, is by far the largest charity in the history of the world and continues to do so. Every single day in Africa, in Asia, in the inner cities, in the suburbs, to the rich people who are struggling with drug abuse, to the poor person who's struggling to pay their bills, to ethnic communities who are outcast because of the color of their skin, to people who are struggling with being overly concerned about or being superstitious about rituals of the faith. The Catholic Church is ministering to them every day, and that cannot be overlooked. We are the largest charity and force for good the world has ever known. And the fact that we are being lumped in with hypocrites is something that we have to work to get that narrative changed, because it infringes on our ability to help even more people than we are.
And it precisely happens when humanity is at its most vulnerable state. So somebody could have the position of, hey, the church is filled with hypocrites until they're dying with cancer, and a priest or a Eucharistic minister or someone from the church, a deacon, comes into their room and says, hey, can I sit down with you for a little while? And then it's renewed in a singular moment of pure charity.
Absolutely.
And it can also be undone very quickly
and
as well.
It can be.
It can
and
also
then
be
we see that with the
undone
abuse scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, generations of families who have had their faith in the church has been ruined in a moment by one perpetrated act against an innocent person. Very fragile.
As you were speaking, I'm thinking of St. Joseph Hospital downtown and the work that's going on in the inner city here, and different missions that I've been a part of, foreign, and hands down, and it's absolutely correct. And what I'm imagining though is this sort of this dependence on that. I think that by the nature of how big we are, of course, we are doing great things.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if we have become, as a laity, more, off the hook. Like, writing a check for an organ, great, do that. Support missions, foreign missions, support the inner city, support the hospitals and the things. But has it become, where our definition of church has become those that are priests, religious, missionaries, ministers.
They're the ones doing it.
They're the ones doing it, and I'm supporting that. Have we become complacent because
activists with their checkbooks only?
Yeah. Like,
or just bragging about it and being apathetic to the spiritual life and the people around you.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'll pick on the pro-life movement, for a moment. Like, great. Let's rock and roll. Let's get laws overturned, and let's elect good officials. But if all of our intent is focused on what we're against and who's the bad guy in the room, and getting the good guy in the room in order to change things, we're doing very little to support women. So there's this, there's this idea that it's both, it is both and. I have to do my part as well.
The first attack you'll see on the pro-life movement is you are for babies being born, but after that you don't care about.
That's the hypocritical. That's the same thing.
And then that's not true, but that's the perception.
But that's the perception. So it's either very, very lousy marketing.
Which call Fusati, we can help.
Yeah. That's true. Like we were talking about, like
that's what we do.
Yeah, the amount of good that's going on through the Catholic Church in Catholic, charities and stuff is incredible. We have lousy marketing, lousy promotion. Who is it? Goodwill. Their slogan: doing the best good.
What? That's their slogan?
Yeah, that's their slogan.
That's terrible.
Doing the best good. It's like, wow.
But it's in two colors, and then it says do good. Yeah.
Like you're looking at it, you're going, good. Wow, you can just say that. Like they can just outright and say that. That's incredible. We need that. Or, the like I was getting to earlier, the idea that this hypocritical notion comes from the laity and the vast majority of us sort of putting the onus completely on the church, which is priests, religious, and organizations, parishes. We see this in religious education as well. Where's the first place you learn about Jesus? In your home. Where are we, taxiing our kids every single Wednesday and Sunday? To the church, to a volunteer that may or may not be formed in teaching the faith,
the expectation of this person that hasn't been formed to instruct the faith is one person serving 1,500, 2,000 people, and then all of the expectation goes on their shoulders. And it's not being shared by the laity to cover the needs of the religious education.
And then we pat ourselves on the back and say, our youth group is awesome.
Yeah.
Because we support youth ministry. We support youth ministry. It's like, you're not doing anything. Yeah. So anyway, I know that was sort of a long rant, but I think there's some of that idea of hypocrisy comes from the
expectation.
Yeah, we've placed it on there. And so we think we're doing that. It's just another end of the spectrum.
Check in a box.
But but the fact does remain that the Catholic Church is the one that is specifically person to person, healing the wounds, giving drugs to people who are dying of diseases. I mean, they are on the ground doing it as a whole. The Catholic Church is the largest provider of that person to person service to the most vulnerable and needy of the world.
But that's not going to give an encounter of Jesus Christ to somebody just by reading it. You know what I mean? Right. I think that's what he's saying is like, just because we're doing this doesn't mean we pat ourselves on the back and that people just barge into our churches. If it did that, we would see that.
But we do.
And it's not happening.
We see the church exploding in Africa because of that. But a lot of times,
it's because they dance. But
a lot of times in our ministry, we have not. That same type of care has not been given to people who are dealing with different issues in our modern world, which is abandonment, loneliness, disenfranchisement, confusion. and just generally living in the modern world, and it's incredibly difficult. Where is our ministry to them that would, I think, really help to clear up some of this charge of hypocrisy?
Yeah. And that's where we're at. I mean, we finally just said, well, we have to know them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in order to know them.
And this is with
Delray Collective. Yeah. This is
tell us about that.
Well,
yeah.
you open your doors to your neighbor. So your son does this. You're realizing that this is central to the gospel. You open your door to your neighbors. I've been. That's where I met you.
Yeah. Right.
So here's a fruit of this ministry, thanks to your son. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And because of that, we've developed this friendship.
Sure.
And I've developed other friendships with your neighbors, and it continues on. And then this is where all this starts coming into play. The
Yeah, and you're right, because you know, getting back to that idea that no one, you know, ideologies are different, and you know, but everybody is in. We're made for community. We're made for communion. We're made for other, not only to you know, to receive what others can give us in that place, but also to learn how to give. We call it sharing and sparing. You know, the idea that, you know, when there's the school of the table, you know, sitting down and learning how to converse, how to bite your tongue, how to be patient, how to ask a question that is not going to be condemning, you know, to understand, to start with genuine curiosity about my Muslim neighbor. I'm just curious. Can you explain? You know, these types of things can happen at a table, whereas you do that in the grocery store, you do that at one or the other church. It just, you know, it doesn't happen there. So, so the school of the table, learning how to share and spare, and you know, like a normal day at we call it open porch. You know, I've got a Methodist trained, you know, a pastor across the street who now is a therapist that practices shamanism. Okay, so very interesting guy. Had no idea until I invited him over to my house. Two doors down, you know, is our Reformed Jewish neighbors, Jerry and Rona, who bake all week and bring it all over to our house, you know, at our open porch. And then, you know, our Muslim neighbors. And sometimes it is literally just those three families. You know, a Methodist pastor who practices shamanism, you know, an elderly couple of Reformed Jews, and our Muslim neighbor, Parveen, who is who's a, you know, a beautiful soul that kind of brings us all together, and we talk openly. There is so much fruit from that relationship of these four families that it has flowed out into their own. Now they're hosting their own little things and coming together. We're able to know the needs of our neighbors, you know, getting back to what you're asking, because we're in a relationship with them. To see, you know, somebody, and unintentionally, we just sort of judge, you know, what is that person about? Man, that guy has a dog that's always out, or he's got a loud motorcycle, or we just use sort of all these, you know, clues to fill in the gaps for what we think about our neighbors. Yeah. And when we do sit down, we learn that they're, you know, people that have needs, that have similar needs. And so Delray Collective was really kind of born out of this idea of, what if, you know, because I love, like, I want to build an alternative to everything that sucks. Like, that is like that's the way my brain works. Yeah, that's how I'm wired. I'm like, that sucks. Let's build an alternative, you know, like, let's do something different. So this was sort of born out of this idea, is like, well, what if we stop doing everything else, and every Christian Catholic family simply opened their doors to their neighbors to learn about them and their
conferences and books. And
instead of doing all of that, what would
except for our
world,
podcast, you still endorse that?
We're drinking coffee. Like, I include this, you know, like the talking head. I have everything figured out, and here's what you need to know. Like, turn that thing off. Like, let's build a better alternative. I think you're onto something here. So we just started, asking that question of, what would it look like if we began to empower families to open their, and it's not the end all be all. It's a part of it, we think, but the vision of every block in every neighborhood, in every city across the country, having a place where a Catholic family was opening their doors with hospitality for a meal with no agenda. No, we're not trying to convert anybody, although that happens and that's wonderful when it does.
Yep.
Oh, what would that look like? And how much fruit could be born, you know? And now there's personalities. And I think you brought that up. Like, not everybody's going to be super cool with everybody coming in.
Someone could come in, try to get in a fight or something.
Yeah. Toxic people.
Yeah.
It happens.
You know, it does. It absolutely does. So there's tips and tricks that we've learned over the past 11, almost 12 years that we felt responsible to begin to disseminate and form and encourage people to do something similar. So it's wild. Now we have this like heat map now that Emily's working on. You know, there's like 600 crazy people out there, you know, in the United States, a couple in Canada, one in Australia that are opening their porches weekly. To do this, wild thing.
The depth of community and neighborhood has changed the way America works in the last 50 years.
Yeah, it used to be
bringing that
like
back
that.
is awesome.
Post World War II, we had, you know, the suburb was born. The automobile was made. You know, so you had places where you slept and then places where you do commerce, and that separated so many people from one another. It's no longer the neighborhood where you could walk to get a haircut. You know, or to the grocery store. And so, and trying to bring that back.
And like I went on a pilgrimage with Ennie and his wife, with my wife, and it was called Pilgrimage of Beauty. We went to this they went to this beautiful place in Guatemala, this lake that we missed because I couldn't find my passport, but I eventually caught back up with you.
Another story, another podcast.
No, let's not do that. I'm already, that's not, but, but like, you know, you think about pilgrimages, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, you go to holy sites, you pray, there's a group of people, you're in a bus and and we're going on one. And I'm really excited about that. This pilgrimage was like, I mean, I spent half the time in awe of the beauty and kind of just meandering through Antigua but most importantly, I got to know these people. We lived in community with each other in a house. We ate together. We and it was just the right amount of people to where we received each other and learned about each other and celebrated this connection that we made on this trip with each other. I think that was just beautiful. How pilgrimage now and your way of rethinking things, you know?
Yeah. Like I'm not going with you guys to Poland. But I'd love to. Yeah. But the only reason I would go would be to sit down with you and have some coffee and eat a meal, because I think that our best work is done there. But my favorite line from you. No, I'm not going to tell a story. My favorite. I can tell some stories.
I just want to stop you.
No. No, at the end of it, I remember you saying, I finished a conversation with my wife.
Yeah.
And that is nothing against, you and your relationship prior.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Isn't that crazy that
what did you like about this trip? And I was like, we talked and then we kind of just went through the whole thing. And then we looked at each other and went,
we finished that conversation. How amazing is that? Right.
And I think that's where it's not because we're, it's because we have 6 small kids and there are needs that supersede our relationship and reinvigorating and re-encountering. I mean, we even go to dinner and we can't finish them because we're talking about all these logistical things and different scheduling and things like that. And it was like we had none of that to do. And when the last words were said and the words fell, we just kind of looked at each other and we're just like,
that's what that feels like.
Awesome.
So back to the neighbor thing. Who is your neighbor? Well, your first neighbor is your spouse.
Yeah.
You know, that and you learn how to reach one level beyond that by finishing a conversation and listening to your first neighbor.
So if there's priests or bishops or people in, just regular married couples that are listening to the show, is this like a curriculum? Is this, is
there a course or an event?
Is there a subscription? Right. And so there's this, that's a great question, and I think there is this fine balance. So what we love to do, because it's based on this relationship, we like to walk with instead of just sort of here's the deal and you go and do your thing. So we're currently walking with like 70 people. We do coaching more or less through a Zoom call. My wife and I hop on, we pour a drink and sit with other couples or, priest, staff, parish staff on how to do that. There's also, parish missions. So we'll do, but for the most part, delraycollective.com. You can kind of find some of the things there, at least the general ideas and values. And then, we're getting started. There's a book coming. Yeah. Cool. I guess I could say it. Yeah. It's a recipe book because food.
Yeah.
And Jesus
ate.
Wait, what?
Lots of people.
You go back and look at the tables that Jesus said. I think oftentimes we look at the Last Supper as the one table, but remember Simon, the Pharisees' table? Remember Zacchaeus's?
One of my favorite
table?
stories in the entire Bible is after his resurrection. He did that. He went and he showed up and he cooked breakfast for the apostles on the beach.
Yeah.
Fish. Which I don't have fish for breakfast. Sounds weird.
Oh, I love it. A nice little salmon.
Lox. Okay, you're right.
On a
Salmon.
bagel,
some capers,
jalapeno.
I remember the first time that occurred to me, I was like, fish for breakfast, gross. And then I realized like Jewish people do eat fish for breakfast, like bagels and lox. Like
But
that's
again,
incredible.
that immediately, that food. And table and community and talking. And then afterwards they eat and they talk.
Right. And we might not agree on politics, but we agree that the fajitas are good.
Yeah.
So you make it
and that's a great start.
And that's a great start to fellowship.
Exactly. That's it.
Start.
If you can create, and this is
That's
something
why there's a recipe book, so it doesn't suck.
Yes, because
So you can have that.
So look, even if the friendship and the talking sucks, at least the food's good.
at least the food's good.
And that's what happens every time I go hunting and fishing with you guys. The conversation totally sucks, but the food is delicious.
That's because you talk all the time.
Keep on coming back.
So good, man. Yeah, Cordua.
So Delray
Collective.com.
And I'll make sure I put a link there on the show page.
DelRayCollective.com.
Yeah,
And we're going to try to Ennie and I are going to try to do more of these trips, these pilgrimages. We're talking about ways to continue what you started through.
That's another way. There's sort of like this moment where you can come away, and we sit and talk and kind of share these types of ideas. The food is key to it. Beauty, right? Leading with beauty, beauty, truth, and goodness.
Amen.
Sometimes we forget to lead with beauty, and the culinary arts are an art. We forgot that. Like, I might not have the same taste in music, or like I look at this Picasso and I don't know but something that tastes good is tasty. Like we all agree on it, and it's not for no reason that God made himself edible.
Yes.
Like, okay, he knew we were going to be hungry. He knew that we could come together, and he said, "How about if I become food?"
And 90% of his ministry was based around the table. Yeah. And we're just so grateful that you joined us at this table, the Catholic Talk Show, to join us with our hosts here and our showrunner, Ryan Shield and Ryan Delacroix.
Thank you.
and I'm very happy to be with you as well. Ennie Hickman, Delray Collective, check him out. And be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We'll be posting things on there, as well as our YouTube followers. Be sure to click the subscribe button and click that little bell so whenever we have a video that produces, it shows up on your feed. And a big thank you. We wouldn't be able to do the show without our patrons. So if you're considering becoming a patron and financially supporting our show, go to patreon.com/Catholic Talk Show. There you'll see every way that you could support the show financially to ensure content like this and so much more continues far into the future. We thank you so much. And Ennie, thank you so much for being here.
This was fun.
You're awesome brother.
Again. Yeah.
And this priest is interested in Delray Collective.
All right, let's do it.
Absolutely.
See you next time.
Awesome. Bye. See you next week.
Peace.